I'd like to welcome you to the first public Peter Norman inauguration day in this city, possibly this country. Heroes come in many forms, and in Australia, unless you're a business leader or a politician, you can't be a hero. The story of Peter Norman is a story that should fill us with both joy and pride and shame. Joy and pride because Peter Norman was a local boy born in Coburg. Shame at the way he was treated and the way he continues to be treated. Now, Peter Norman was Australia's representative in the 1968 Mexico Olympics. And just before the Olympics occurred, a few days before, over 1,000 students who were protesting were massacred by the Mexican government in Mexico City. And those of you who are old enough to remember, 1968 was a pivotal year in terms of people reclaiming their birthright as citizens. It was a year of protest and revolution and reform across the globe, and Mexico City was no different. And in this cauldron, Peter Norman, a young man, went to represent Australia in the 2,000 metres. Sorry, 200 metres, my apologies. I get carried away. Hyperbole. 200 metres. Well, he did race 2,000 metres after his 200 metre race, but that's a different story. But and nobody expected that Peter Norman would get anywhere. And he won a silver medal. But he's not remembered for, he's not a great Australian hero for winning a silver medal. He is a man who understood the time. He's a man who felt that all human beings were created equal, irrespective of race and gender, class. And when the gold medalist and the bronze medalist, Afro-Americans, told him, "Do you support human rights?" He said he did. And they told him they were going to do the Black Power salute on the dais to highlight the inequalities that existed in the American South in 1968. And Peter Norman, on his way to the medal presentation, asked an American rower if he could wear his human rights badge, which a section of the American athletes were wearing. And he stood on the dais with these men when they gave the Black Power salute, which was seen around the world as a symbolism of the inherent inequalities that existed based on race in the United States, especially in the southern United States. And for that small act of solidarity, that small act of standing on the dais for a small badge, his whole life and the life of his family was changed. He made a stand on the day. And when he came back to this country, he was punished. And he was punished decade after decade, not just by the Athletics Association, the Australian Athletics Association, but by the government of the day and the media, who if you look at the reports in that period of time, the newspaper reports, you will see he was seen as subversive. He was seen as somebody who didn't reflect the Australian ideals and the Australian way of life. And he continued to pay the price all his life. And when the 2000 Olympics, Sydney won the 2000 Olympics, every Tom, Dick and Harry who had been a medalist, was invited to the 2000 Olympics, and Peter Norman was not invited. He was not invited by the Australian Olympic Committee. And when his friends from the United States, who he'd kept contact with, asked him where he was going to be, they said, well, I'm not going to be anywhere. So the Australian the United States Track and Field Association invited him to be their special guest at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, because they understood what he had done. A white man standing with two black men on this dais in 1968 had reverberations which improved the lives of people, not just in the United States but around the world. That solidarity that crossed colour was so important that they invited him. And when he died, a relatively young man, in 2005, on the 3rd of October, both men, the gold and silver Olympians, came to do eulogies at his funeral in Coburg and to carry his coffin. And when they went back to the United States Track and Field Association declared that the 9th of October, the day his funeral was held, this is only 7 years ago, as Peter Norman Human Rights Day in the United States. And all across the states today, in a few hours' time, on the 9th of October, all across the United States, athletic associations and human rights groups will be celebrating Peter Norman Human Rights Day. And in this country, he continues to be a pariah. Now, we didn't want to organise anything today. I said to people, let's wait and see if something else is organised. Let's wait and see if the civil authorities organise something. Let's wait and see if the state government organises something. Let's wait and see if the Athletics Association organises something. Nothing. So like the Tunnerminnerwait and Mulboyheenner commemoration we held in 2006, where a dozen people turned up, it's my belief that we should celebrate this day, because it's important that we choose who our heroes are, who the great Australians are. We don't allow the state or the corporate sector to choose our heroes. There's a statue of Burke and Wills, two total losers in a prominent position in this city. Where is the statue to Peter Norman? Where is the monument? Where are the ceremonies? What is important, more important than human rights? So next year, we'll get this thing organised properly. We'll have a PA system. We'll get guest speakers. We'll do it properly. We'll do it here. And it's important that we're going to do it here for one very good reason. Because at the end of last year, or could have been early this year, my memory's pretty poor these days, we came here after Occupy Melbourne was removed on the 21st of October, and we renamed this square Human Rights Square. And it's quite appropriate that on Peter Norman Human Rights Day, on the 9th of October 2012 and 2013 and 2014 and time immemorial, that people congregate in Melbourne's Human Rights Square to celebrate what this man did. Now, I know I've been very verbose today and I've spoken a lot, but I feel it's important that this is one of those great unwritten, untold Australian stories that should be in every school, in every textbook, on everybody's lips. That's more important than Invasion Day, the 26th of January. It's more important than many of the other public holidays that we have. So, it's my pleasure to declare this the first public gathering to celebrate Peter Norman Day in this city. And just in case you think that we didn't advertise this widely. We send out hundreds, if not thousands, of emails to the media. We send out this little leaflet to explain what it's all about. And you can see that it's of no interest to them, Peter Norman Day. There will be no eulogies given. There will be, apart maybe from his family, who'll remember him. But we remember him more than a father and a husband and a citizen. We remember him as a great Australian, a man who seized the moment and used that moment to advance everybody's welfare, not just a particular class or gender or race. So I'm very pleased you're here, and I'm sure you'll all be here next year, and we will organise something to make him proud next year. So I open it up to other people because I've taken up too much time. So thank you for coming. Peter Norman Day.
My name's Trevor Grant. I'm a sports writer who's worked in 40 years in the media, and I've done a lot of research on Peter Norman. I've left the mainstream media now, and I'm about to do a program on 3CR, and my first program will be about Peter Norman. I've spoken to his cousin who made the movie, and and I've done a fair bit of research, and I think a really important thing is to keep this going, because only 2 months ago the Australian government in federal parliament had an apology for Peter Norman, and the Australian Olympic Council refused to have anything to do with that particular apology. What they also said, their spokesman, was that people who want an apology should actually look at Australia, look at the world now. We live in a different time. There is no racism. Have a look at the colour. Have a look at the colour of the American president. Well, we all laughed at that. The other important thing, I think, in understanding what Joe just said about the terrible time that Peter Norman faced when he got back. He qualified 13 times to run in Munich in 1972. 13 times he was under the qualifying time, and he wasn't sent because he ran third with an injured leg in the trials. And they, for the first time in history and the only time, the AOC did not send sprinters to an Olympic Games. And then the following Olympic Games in Montreal, that they actually said that Peter Norman didn't go because he ran third, and you have to win at the trials. Well, a man called Peter Fitzgerald ran second in 1976 in the 200 metres to Greg Lewis, and he was sent ahead of Greg Lewis to the Montreal Games. So they are telling lies, and I have the proof. I've written a story about this that I'm going to, I might even send to Joe, with all the rebuttal of what the IOC is saying now. You know, I would say that most Olympic committees around the world really embrace this sort of thing because it's a new era, and it was a perfect chance for the AOC not only to say sorry, but say we are against racism, and they won't say it. And I think that says a lot about the AOC. Just one more point. When Peter Norman was invited to the 2000 Games by the American team, or by the American Athletic Association, the Secretary of the American Athletic Association gave up his hotel room for Peter Norman, and he was the guest of honour at the birthday of Michael Johnson, who's the most famous 200 and 400 runner in history. And he'd never met Michael Johnson. He went to the birthday party as a sort of a bit of a guest of honour, and he went up and shook Michael Johnson's hand and said, I'm Peter Norman. He said, I know who you are. He gave him a big hug and said, you are my hero. Michael Johnson said to Peter Norman, you are my hero. So that tells you how the Americans deal with it and how the Australians deal with it. Thank you.
There's a Queensland artist called Richard Bell who is part of a group called Proper Now, and he painted a version of that famous photograph for an exhibition here in Melbourne, a sports exhibition. So we entered that in that prize. So the story's getting out there, and very important. So keep your eye open and spread the word.
And at San Jose University, they have produced a statue of Tommy Smith and John Carlos, the gold and bronze medalist, and they left the place for the silver medalist vacant. And Peter Norman went there and he celebrated the fact that was left vacant because he said this is a chance for people to stand with Carlos and Smith's ideals. So the idea is that when people go and see the statue, they actually stand where Peter Norman did. So it's quite a unique way to present something, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, my name is Rick, and if we concentrate just...
Rick, talk to everybody. The camera follows you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, don't worry about the camera.
Okay, not used to this.
That's his job.
soon.
You're talking. We're here not for the camera. We're here for the event.
And if you consider the feat, the time Peter Norman recorded, which apparently has not been bettered by any other Australian. Now that in itself is marvellous, but when you take into account the fact that Mexico City is at a high altitude and it is much harder in a rarefied atmosphere to perform athletic feats. And I can vouch for the rarefied atmosphere because I spent some time in tripping around Mexico City and other parts of Mexico. So Peter's feat from an athletic point of view was a marvellous achievement. And in a culture where Australia is expected to win gold, 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 and we saw it throughout the Commonwealth Games, the splashed across the headlines of the paper would be gold, gold, gold. Even though the opposition was very poor, Australia had to win gold. And then when it came to 1976, and the greatest shock for the politicians here, practically of all time, no gold medal in Montreal for Australia. And Malcolm Fraser felt so humiliated that he decided to set in train a program of athletic development, and I think eventually the sports centre in Canberra was set up, and over the years hundreds of millions of dollars have been pumped into that to bring Australia's athletic standards higher, competing for gold, 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 which is the only glory the politicians see. Now, Peter stood up for human rights throughout his life, and here in this country, supposedly egalitarian, we have a hideous thing called the Northern Territory Intervention, to the undying shame of the coalition which introduced it, and the undying shame of the Labor Party, which has continued it, if not increased it. Australia is seen for what it is, an absolutely racist country. And the recent push for Australia to have a seat on the Security Council of the United Nations shows what absolute effrontery and hypocrisy prevail in this country. The whole thing is absolutely mind-boggling. And it's no wonder that Australia, in the eyes of the world, is just a racist, racist, racist country. And if Peter Norman had been treated with respect, and the Indigenous people up in the Northern Territory likewise with respect, that whole image would be turned around considerably, and we'd be perhaps on the way to a fairer society.
Yes, thank you. Is there anybody else? Remember, next year is going to be thousands. It's going to be crowded. I've got a plan. When I've got a plan, it'll be all right. It'll work.
Does the Olympic team get? Do they get millions in Australia?
Not really.
To send them off? They don't get
some
millions?
money. But that's not the issue. The issue is what Peter Norman stood for. The issue isn't anything else. The issue is the universal nature of his struggle, and that's the key about that sculpture at San Jose University, that every man, every woman can walk into that spot and make a difference. This is a man who didn't go to Mexico to make a difference. Remember all those opportunities we have to make a difference and we walk away.
Courage.
Yes,
The man had a lot of courage.
That's right.
They wouldn't have all that. in
That's right.
Australia. You've got to have courage.
well, some people do and some people
Yes,
don't.
some do.
But what we need to do is we need to create a culture where people feel comfortable to make a difference, where they feel comfortable to step in on that silver medalist dais and not actually be punished for what they do. And so this is about changing cultural attitudes to who is and who isn't important to the history of this country and the present and the future of this country. And Peter Norman is the perfect example of an ordinary man who found himself in an extraordinary situation, who rose to the challenge, took that challenge, stood on that diocese, did what he had to do for human beings, did what he had to do for his fellow human beings, irrespective of their colour, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their religion. The same principles embodied in Eureka, those of us who celebrate that, the same principles. And every man, every woman, every child has that opportunity. But in this country we have a culture of punishing those who make that step. And it's our goal through a Peter Norman Day to actually ensure the person who makes that step is celebrated as not only a great Australian, but more importantly a great human being. And that's what Peter Norman was, a great human being who rose to the moment, who seized the moment, and who paid the price for the next 40 years for his courageous act. And nobody should have to pay a price, that type of price, for standing up for human rights. And that's what Peter Norman Day is all about, in my opinion. That's what it's about. It's about the day for every man and every woman to step forward for everyone else in their community and their society, irrespective where they were born, whether they're residents, whether they're citizens, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're yellow, whether they're brindle, whether they're male, whether they're female, whether they're young, whether they're old, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, whatever. That's what it's about. And that's why I think what we've done today can be groundbreaking, and it's something that I think we should pursue long term. So thank you for coming, and unless there's anybody else who wishes to say anything, we'll call it a day.
I suppose the United States Track and Field Association would want to know that we're followed on with their declaration of Peter Norman Day, and particularly their members Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and the rower Paul Norman. I suppose we ought to do that.
You'll be able to do that on our behalf?
Yes, I can. I certainly can, Joe. I think that's an excellent idea.
Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a joint meeting with yourself, myself, and maybe a representative of the family, so that we can actually start planning for 2013 this year. Because I am sure there'd be many people who would love to come if it's organised properly, if we've got a long lead time and we've got a good list of guest speakers.
I think there'd be quite a few from the athletics community that would come who, we can make contact that way. And the other interesting thing to me is that Tommy Smith and John Carlos, their punishment for standing with that Black Power salute was to be banned for life from the Olympic IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and the American Olympic Commission. So they're banned for life and still are. And a man called Colonel T. Hull, who was part of the American team, he was part of the management, who said directly after the thing happened that I would like to take a gun and shoot Carlos. He is now a life member of that same commission. He got in, and another man called Avery Brundage, whose greatest feat was to give Hitler the Olympic Games when he was on the American Olympic Committee. So he's in as a life member, but John Carlos and Tommy Smith are banned for life. So that tells you about how they run their athletics at the top.
Well said. Thank you for coming, and we're very pleased to have you here because you're going to be our